I'm glad that you're here with us for this weekly devotional. I began thinking today this idea of forgiveness. So often, as one who is not a child of God, I try to talk to one and trying to show him who this God is, this Jesus who died for one's sins, that the blood of Christ might cleanse us of those sins, that forgiveness of sin. Trying to help one understand that, and often they will tell you, I've been so bad that God can just not forgive me. There's just no way. I don't think he will overlook all of those things. It's just not one of those things that's going to happen. And so we often get to that point, and that's the excuse. And sometimes it's genuine in their thought. It's just not good enough. We know that in 2 Samuel, in the 11th chapter, we find David on the rooftop of the palace or whatever it might be. And he looked down and he saw Bathsheba, and he become, we might say, enamored by her. As she bathed there, he began to want her, seek her, think about who she was, and what like any man, began to absorb himself in that woman, seeking her. We know that later he arranged it for her to come into his household, and he, if we dare say this, had sex with her. She belonged to another man. And she became pregnant, and David knew that Uriah was in battle, and so he called Uriah back home, had the messenger come or send the messenger to bring him back, to give him certain orders, to give him thoughts and things that he needed. But he refused to spend the night with his wife. He slept outside and out in front of the door. And he refused to go lay with his wife because he was a man of honor, I guess you would say. All the other men were in battle. And so David sends him back with a message given for that one who was in charge to be sure and put Uriah at the front of the battle, in the heat of the battle, and then pull back from him that he might die. Essentially, is what happened. And he was. And so here we have David, who has sought this woman who was not his. And we would say committed a tremendous amount of sins. And you think, how could, why would he do that? He belonged to God. He was a man after God's own heart. And it come to this point, I don't know that I want to dwell on it, but each of us have difficulties in life. We fail. We do things we should not do. We go against God in some manner, sometime in our life. Is that one who doesn't have God? We have to have that forgiveness of Christ, that forgiveness through Christ, through the blood. But even those who are children of God, who have sought that forgiveness, they often find themselves in life events that turn awry because of mistakes they made, because of lusting after someone or something, and it causes great difficulties. And they think, God won't forgive me for this. I want you to listen to what is said. Nathan meets David, and he came to him and said there were two men in a certain city. This is chapter 12. The one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and his children. And he used to eat of the morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms. And it was like a daughter to him. And now came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own in the flock or herd and prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, this man who has done this deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing, because he has no pity. You see, Nathanael was describing David to him. David saw the evil in this man that took the lamb. He didn't yet see the evil of that man who took a man's wife. Until verse 7, and David said to Nathan, you are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul, and I gave you your master's house, your master's wives, and your arms into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if this was too little, I would add to you much more. Why have you despised the words of the Lord? He seeks these things. David begins to have remorse. He begins to have difficulty. Samuel continues to give the things that the Lord had said to him. They were destructive. He said, David, you're going to face the consequences of the life you've chosen. You're going to face the consequences of those things that you've done. But we come down to verse 13, and David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord has also put away your sin. You shall not die. When you think, well, this is a horrible sin. This is a sin that should have never happened. And David likely gave the correct penalty, was death. But it said that he removed the sin. This is difficult for us to comprehend. And yet we look at that thing. If one is truly repentant, God will bring you to him. If that one who is outside of Christ seeks Christ, Christ will forgive his sins. If he honestly and earnestly gives himself over to follow in the steps of Christ, if he accepts that blood as a cleansing for his sins and follows into a life with God. But even after that, that one who fails, or that one who makes dire mistakes and faces dire consequences, even after giving himself to God, still has that avenue of forgiveness. We have to remember that. It's so tough for us to get a hold of. We want to just make an excuse and walk away and say, but God won't. God will. If I'm willing to give myself, God will. He will forgive me. He will accept me. He will make me his child. All I have to do is be willing to accept that forgiveness. I can continue in God's grace if I am a child of God. But I must remember that it is through him that forgiveness comes. I need to admit my faults before him. I need to seek him and say, Lord, I failed. I failed and sinned in this manner. But he's always there to pick us up and to take us back in and care for us. We need to remember those things. We need to seek that way. And those who are lost need to realize that Christ seeks, he direly seeks for you to have the forgiveness of sin. He shed his blood willingly for that one reason, that we might have the forgiveness of sin. John 3:16 says that all men might be saved. I hope you will think about these things. I hope you will take it and try to get a hold of these things if you're looking for Christ. If you're looking for that time with him and you think that God just won't forgive, God will. It takes us earnestly seeking Him. If you have any questions, I wish you would get a hold of me with a private message. I'm willing to talk or visit with you anytime. I want to thank you for being here with us today, and may God bless.